Welcome inside the Citrus TV studios to this special CitrusTV.net exclusive of Cuse Countdown as we take a look at Syracuse's next matchup against the Pitt Panthers. With analysts Mark Sell and Evan Weston, I'm Dan Gerard. And guys, starting off, this team is right now 19-0, seeking the best start in program history at 20-0, also the lone unbeaten in the Big East at 6-0. What has been the biggest surprise to you in terms of the players on the Syracuse roster?
Fabricio De Mello.
Good accent.
Let me tell you, thank you very much. Now, let me tell you, this guy, there's a lot of questions about him coming into this season, how he'd rebound from that awful freshman year he had. Well, Evan, he has nearly 3 blocks per game. He's been fantastic.
He has, but someone who was even less expected, how about James Sutherland? Supposed to be a non-factor this year. He's coming off the bench and contributing solid minutes and points. Really
that sharpshooter for Syracuse. Now, of course, all throughout the season, Cuse Countdown has you covered on everything Syracuse basketball. You can follow us on Twitter at Cuse Countdown and give your thoughts and predictions on upcoming games, as well as hearing from all our analysts everything you need to know to get you ready for the next SU basketball matchup. Now we're going to go to a little thing I like to call the three-man weave. I'm just going to pose some questions for you about Syracuse and this Pitt matchup and really just give you a little response to that. Now to start off, Syracuse right now at 19-0, the lone unbeaten in the Big East, right now one of 3 unbeatens in the entire country. How has SU gotten there to this point?
Pretty simple. It's been the defense. It's the bread and butter of this Syracuse team, that 2-3 zone, and the team has the amount of talent where they can now move to man-to-man, and that's what Jim Boeheim experimented with early in the season. But the big thing to take away from this defense, turnovers forced. Syracuse nearly 11 steals per game this year, and Evan, that's exactly what happens when you got talented guards like Scoop Jardine, Brandon Trish, and Dion Waiters running the point.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Dion. It's his world, and we're all just living in it. The guy's been fantastic this season. 2.2 steals a game. That's 4th in the Big East. And like you talked about when we were opening up, how about Fab Mello? He's 2nd in the Big East in blocks. It's the sophomores that are really taking this team to the next level. Even C.J. Fair and Baikita contributing. C.J. Fair has been fantastic off the bench. All of them. Solid job to get Syracuse to 19-0.
Yeah, the emergence of the sophomores is a major key for the Syracuse team this season. Now, next up, guys, they are on the verge of breaking the all-time record for the best start in program history at 20-0, right now tied with the 99-2000 team at 19-0. Does that have any effect going into Monday night's matchup against Pittsburgh?
Well, Dan, it's a young team, and you saw them last year when they were even younger, struggling against when up against the record when they were 18-0. I think it certainly probably won't be a big deal. I think it can't really help them. It can hurt them if they allow it to take them away from their disciplined form of basketball, and I think they have to avoid doing that tonight.
Well, we all know how humble that this Syracuse team is. And earlier in the week, Chris Joseph simply just said, we don't go out onto the court in these games looking to break records A, B, and C. This is a Syracuse team that coming up on Monday night, if they get the record, it can only help them. And Jim Boeheim obviously was the coach 1999 to 2000 when they set the record, so it's not going to be news to him.
Yeah, just take one game at a time. Now, last up, Syracuse-Pitt. This series has been in Pitt's favor in recent years. 5 straight wins going back to the 2006-2007 season. The biggest reason is, why has that been the case?
Well, it comes down to out-coaching, basically, and we know how good Jamie Dixon is, one of the best coaches in the conference, if not the country. But let's go back to the game at the Pitt last year. Pitt scored the first 19 points, and then SU scored the next 17. But then it was basically over after that. Syracuse didn't end up winning the game, losing by 8, but they didn't lead for the rest of the game, and that comes down to coaching. Jamie Dixon telling his players, get back to what we do best of Pitt basketball, defense, 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 and that's how they were able to win the game.
Well, you talk about Dixon, he's the coach, he can only do so much. Let's talk about the players. Pitt's been a matchup nightmare for Syracuse for a very long time, about a half-decade now. I mean, how many nightmares does a Syracuse fan have to have about DeJuan Blair devouring rebounds, making Rinze Anawaku and Rick Jackson look ridiculous? Levance Fields could operate out of the high post. Sam Young, dynamite from 3 in those last 2 years. It's the matchups that can hurt a 2-3 zone that Pitt has exhibited over the last few years.
All right, good stuff, guys. We'll check back with you shortly, but it's now time for the tip-off. Now, Pittsburgh has been the model of consistency in the Big East for the past decade. 10 straight NCAA tournament berths, and they look primed to extend that streak to 11 behind preseason Conference Player of the Year Ashton Gibbs. Now, the question is, of course, whether the pressure of carrying the Panthers can be tough on the senior guard. Well, Gibbs' teammates did not think so.
Ashton, we know he's going to play every night, no matter who he plays. I think there's not really too much weight on him. I think he's not going to worry about it. I think he can come out and play his game. If he come out and play his game, at the end of the year, things should work out good.
Now the early aspirations quickly turned sour as Pitt is in the midst of a 6-game losing streak and off to a shocking 0-5 start in Big East play. Despite the struggles, head coach Jim Boeheim knows to not take this team lightly.
Yeah, I watched them play. They played very well today. They had a real good chance to win. They're a good team. I don't care what their record is. They've got a good team. And, they'll come in here Monday night and they'll play well. I know that.
And can you blame Coach? Pittsburgh is at SU's number in recent years. 5 straight losses for the Orange in this series dating back to the 06-07 season. Senior forward Chris Joseph gives the key to how Pitt has handled SU of late.
They were well coached. They knew how to attack the zone pretty well. A lot of times, they play tough. They're known to out tough guys. They're not the biggest team, but they play with a lot of heart and they're physical. And that's something that I'm sure they're still doing, and we're gonna have to be able to,
Now, as I touched on earlier, the Pitt Panthers has been among the most elite programs in the Big East in the past decade. 10 straight NCAA tournament berths, but that streak is now in serious jeopardy. After being ranked top 10 nationally and picked 4th in the conference preseason, Pittsburgh is now laboring at 0-5 in conference. Our analyst will explore why one of the top programs in recent years is now facing a steady downfall. And to start off, guys, defense, which has been a major trademark for Pitt and really Coach Jamie Dixon in recent years, really has fallen off a cliff. Now, Mark, why has that been the case?
Well, it's not the rebounding. Pittsburgh's still at the top of the conference when it comes to that, but it's opponents' field goal percentage. Opposing teams are shooting nearly 44% against Pittsburgh this year. That's the second worst defense in the Big East Conference. Now, we all know how good Ashton Gibbs is on the offensive end when it comes to guarding teams up at the top of the court. Syracuse has Gibbs, but they don't have anyone else right now. And the only other experienced guy that they got, Trayvon Woodall, he's missed the last 4 games with an injury, so they're missing his veteran leadership, Evan.
And how about Gibbs? He's all alone back there, and he's averaging the same number of points that he did last time. But take a look at his shooting percentage. It is way down, unbelievably lower than last year. Look at this difference. 49% from 3 last season is right here. Look at the numbers that he's posting this season. 14 points lower from 3. 8 points lower from the field. And yet, his points per game has not changed. He's taking way more shots to get to just as many points. That's inefficient basketball. It's a huge reason why Pitt struggled this year. And it's partially due to the fact that he's more heavily guarded, but still, big disappointment from Ashton Gibbs this season.
Now, no doubt, also another thing is the Peterson Event Center has been one of the more formidable home courts in the entire country. Well, this year, not so much. Some head-scratching losses on the surface for the Panthers.
It's crazy, Dan. Long Beach State, Wagner, and Rutgers. Now, for Long Beach State, we all know how good Casper Ware is, but what Rutgers did against Pittsburgh on Wednesday, they went in there and they beat them by 23 points. I mean, I'm trying to come up with answers for this, but it's just mind-boggling. Like you just said, the Pete, one of the hardest places to play college basketball games in the country. Pittsburgh just isn't coming out with that intensity and that fire in the belly, and they need to start doing it if they want to turn their season around.
They just didn't lose by 23. They also put up just 39 points, just a meager effort. And last off, Evan, Ken Birch was supposed to be the guy for Pittsburgh coming in this season, a McDonald's All-American. Well, after a few games, already transferred. Now he's on his way to UNLV. How has that been a huge gap in the middle for the Panthers?
Well, Birch hasn't been a huge gap on the court because he didn't play that much. Jamie Dixon kept him on the bench. He was dominant when he was on the floor, had 5 rebounds and 2 blocks a game. Would have put him near the leaders in the Big East in both categories if you stretch it out over starters' minutes. And I could completely understand why Ken Birch would leave. Jamie Dixon wasn't playing him enough. And now not only do they lose a big man going forward, they also lose a little bit of prestige. It's going to hurt Jamie Dixon's recruiting prospects. You say if you're an All-American, oh, if I go to Pitt, am I going to get benched? It's certainly a worry.
All right, well, good stuff, guys. Now, no doubt that Pittsburgh has been one of the biggest disappointments, if not the biggest, in all of college basketball this season. However, there may be a light at the end of this tunnel for Coach Jamie Dixon's squad. Let's take a look at some of the featured players on this Panthers squad, and the ideal place to start is with the preseason Big East Player of the Year in Ashton Gibbs. And Gibbs decided to come back to the Steel City for his senior year. His numbers on the surface, well, not all that bad, averaging just under 17 points a game, but his shooting percentage way down, as Evan alluded to just under 38%. Just trying to do too much to lead the way. Fellow senior Nasir Robinson is the leading rebounder for the Panthers at almost 7 boards a game. This despite his 6'5" frame, and he's had to fill the role left by the graduation of both Gilbert Brown and Brad Wanamaker, who both epitomize the toughness of really every Jamie Dixon coach squad. Lastly, junior forward Dante Taylor in the starting lineup for the first time, replacing Gary McGee as the top guy in the middle for the Panthers. The former McDonald's All-American has seen his production increase being in the starting five and currently stands 9th all-time in offensive rebounds in Big East history with 173. Now, let's take a look at what is at stake for Syracuse in this matchup on Monday night against the Pitt Panthers, as I've alluded to. Pitt has really had Syracuse's number of late. 5 straight wins for the Panthers dating back to the 2006 Big East Championship, the last time Syracuse was able to down Pittsburgh. That was, of course, at Madison Square Garden. The Orange, of course, is seeking its best start in program history at 20-0, breaking the previous mark set back in 99-2000. Also going for its first 7-0 mark in conference play since the 04-05 season. Lastly, with a win Monday night, Coach Jim Boeheim could tie legendary Kentucky head coach Adolph Rupp for 4th all-time with wins with 876. Now, once again, welcome inside the Citrus TV studios for the special CitrusTV.net exclusive of Cuse Countdown. I'm Dan Gerard alongside Mark Sell and Evan Weston as we take a look at Syracuse's matchup Monday night inside the Carrier Dome and against the sagging Pitt Panthers. Now, looking ahead to Monday night's matchup, let's take a look at some X factors for Syracuse. What are they going to have to look out for?
Well, keep an eye out for Kita in this game, and I only say that for this reason and this reason alone. Now, Pittsburgh is still pulling down 40 rebounds a game this year. They're still a very physical team. I don't think that bodes too well for Fab Melo, so I see him getting into some foul trouble, and Pittsburgh's still that physical team, even though they don't have Gary McGee and Trayvon Woodall, but that opens up the window for Kita to come in and log some solid minutes on Monday night.
Well, I'm not going to look at a specific player as much as I'm going to look at the history of the last half-decade of this rivalry, and Pitt has dominated. Now, remember, no one on Syracuse has ever beaten Pitt, and no one on Pitt has ever lost to Syracuse. That mindset's got to play in. Somebody can harness that, turn it into motivation, and say, we're going to go out there, we're going to play more disciplined, more balanced basketball. And I understand that Syracuse hasn't been this heavily favored against Pitt in a very long time, but that could help the Panthers win this one.
Well, something's going to have to do inside the Carrier Dome, whether Syracuse sets the mark for best start in program history at 20-0 or Pitt continues its dominance against Syracuse in recent years. Something's going to have to do. Who do you got?
I like Syracuse getting the record. I see them winning 80-68, the final score. And obviously, Jim Boeheim said, and we just heard earlier, that he said it doesn't matter how many wins Pitt has, doesn't matter who they have, they're still that physical team, and I still see them putting up a fight. But at the end of the day, too much of that 2-3 zone and those turnovers that Syracuse forces, I see them getting the win.
I'm going to go even closer. I think it'll be a little bit more low scoring. I'm going to go 70-64 SU. I think it'll be a little bit like the Marquette game. Syracuse gets off to a good start. Gibbs isn't shooting, but watch out for Pitt in the second half. Syracuse can lull to sleep. Jamie Dixon's going to have his team ready to play. I think it's going to be a frantic final 5 minutes with Syracuse just having a little bit too much firepower, pulling away at the end of the game.
No free tacos for the fans on Monday night, according to Evan.
Not at all.
Well, it certainly won't be a cakewalk. Well, that'll about wrap things up here on Cuse Countdown. Be sure to tune into our first full edition of Cuse Countdown Saturday morning at 11 a.m. on Time Warner Cable Channel 13 as we preview Syracuse's matchup at Notre Dame. For analysts Mark Sell and Evan Weston, good job, guys. I'm Dan Gerard, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at Cuse Countdown as well as at Citrus TV Sports. And also go to our sports blog at CitrusTV.net. But for now, take it easy, Syracuse.